Well, first, let me give you a little background. I was born in 1938, and the neighborhood I grew up in had 5 houses on each side of the street. That was a block. That block had 10 houses on it. Out of those 10 houses, there were 8 of them that had people that drove. And 2 of the houses, the people didn't own a car or drive. They caught the bus or walked everywhere they went. So there were about 6 or 7 cars on the block, and I was the only kid in the family, so I had a mother and a dad, and yeah, I was wanting to learn how to drive. My first transportation was a bicycle. I rode a bicycle all over the city of Amarillo, and when we were in junior high school, we had a class that we all took. It on the Texas handbook on driving. I mastered that course, and we took the driver's test in school to get a learner's permit to learn, for driving. So once I had that in hand, it was a matter of convincing my mother and father to let me learn how to drive. Amarillo at that time, Western and Georgia streets were dirt roads, and no traffic much on them. So my mother would take me down on Georgia, and she was driving a 51 Ford at that time. So we'd get in that little Ford, and I'd drive those streets. And then the streets that ran east and west were dirt. So we'd drive out those streets into the country. We'd drive around out there and back and forth, and come back to town and drive back and forth, and then we'd drive on Georgia up to Wolfland Avenue, and we'd stop there, and my mother would get in the car and drive us back home. We did that for a while, and I'd completed the written stuff for the driver's permit. And so we got to where we were driving more and more. We were driving in town. See, we had a learner's permit. And my mother needed to go to the grocery store. So I'm getting that car and we're going to drive down to Furs at corner of 15th and Washington. So I drive down there and stop in the parking lot. And she'd go in the shop for groceries. When she came back out, I'd have the job of driving home, drive up in the driveway. Then I'd unload the groceries, carry them in the house. And that was a real thrill for a guy that's just learning how. And I would say it was a fun experience. In our car, in our family, we had Fords and Lincolns. And my dad had a 40 Lincoln V12 that he drove. And my mother had a 1947 Lincoln V12 that she drove, and that Ford. So I learned how to drive some pretty big cars and learned a lot about vehicles by then. The Lincolns were V12s, which by that time was not a real common thing to have a V12 powered car. But I learned how to take care of those and work on those things as just a boy. And it's quite an experience. And I got good enough, was old enough, I could take the driving test, so we went out to the DPS, which was out on 10th Street out there where it forks off. And the DPS was right there. So we went out there and they came out and I took the driving test and had to do a parking maneuver out there, and I managed to do that. Doggone, I got my driver's license. I was in hog heaven then. Driving became an important thing in my life. And the way I got my first vehicle was that my dad decided that he was going to get another car. So we went out and bought a 1957 Ford station wagon. I never will forget him when he came home, bought that car. Said that Lincoln sitting out there on the driveway. Said, it's yours. You can take it out and tear it up, or you can take care of that car. But he said that son of a gun wouldn't give me enough money for that car, so he said, well, if you sons of bitches won't give me enough money to pay for selling you that car, I'll just take it home and give it to my boy. So he brought it home and he gave it to me. He said, I'm not buying any gasoline for it. I'm not going to change the oil in it. I'm not going to do anything to that car. It's yours. You're going to take care of it. If you tear it up, then you won't have a car. If you take care of it, you'll have a car. Well, that was okay with me. I was in high school by then. I went to Amarillo High School when I was down there on Polk Street at 12th and Polk. So I started driving that 40 Lincoln to school every day. Parked it right there on the corner of 12th and Tyler in front of a gray house that belonged to the First Baptist Church. That was quite an experience. I played in the band, Sandy Band. I was a business manager for the Sandy Band. I took care of all the equipment and everything. We practiced down on Elwood Park, and so every day when I'd get to school in the afternoon, I'd take that car and load up the yard markers, and the band director and all of us, and we'd drive down to the park, and I'd set up the yard markers so we could practice those shows for the football games. And oh, it was a lot of fun, you know. And we'd get through, and about 6 o'clock, and I'd load up the yard markers in the car and all the stuff we'd haul down there and haul it back to school and take it in. Quite an experience. And you look back on those things, it was an enjoyable thing. Driving that car, going to school in it, carrying all that equipment to the park, carrying it all back. But I had a responsibility to take care of, and I did. My best friend's name was Drew Crossett. Drew Crossett and I are still friends today. He lived in San Antonio. But he and I rode 1,000 trips in that car. When we get out of school, at the end of the day and get through that, well, I'd take him by and drop him off over on Jackson. That house where he lived on Jackson is gone. This is everything over there in that neighborhood because they built Interstate 40 through there. They took the houses, tore them out, just cut a swath through Amarillo. That was an experience in itself. I was over there cutting wood on it all the time. We burned wood in our shop at home, so them trees were knocked down. We'd go there and cut them trees up, haul them back over there to the house, and I'd have to stack them up in the backyard. So I learned a lot doing that. I graduated from Amarillo High School. In the meantime, I had a job. I worked at the Amarillo National Bank when school was out, running a coin wrapping machine. Now that's where I made my money. And when my dad gave me that Lincoln, he had used it and had carried his toolboxes, everything else in it. The old upholstery was wore out and frayed. So I did the natural thing. I went and checked with all the people that did interiors. I went down to Woodman's Trim Shop. Jake Woodman ran that trim shop. I made a deal with him to reupholster that thing. We put a white headliner in it with red piping through all the seams. We did the seats, pleated and rolled, red and white. The panels on the doors and everything were done in naugahyde, red and white. Let me tell you, if you wanted to see a nice interior in a car, that was it. So I drove that car, pleated and rolled, everything I did. I'd painted that car. Back then we used synthetic enamel. Sanded all that car myself. Got it ready to paint. Had a good friend named P.E. Thomas, and I took that car down there to his shop. Had it ready to paint. He painted it black, pinstriped with white pinstripes. Oh, it was a nice car, man. You get in that thing and drive down the street. Whether you knew anybody else knew it or not, you knew you were somebody. And I drove that car to the bank and graduated from Amarillo High School and started at Amarillo College. Amarillo College today is not like it was back then. Amarillo College had the main building on Washington, had a gym down on the corner, had a building that ran from a parking lot east out there, and then there were two other buildings that ran north and south from that. And I'd drive over there on that parking lot. I'd get there early in the morning, I'd park in that parking lot and go to class and everything. When I got through, I'd go out there and get out of Lincoln and crank it up. Of course, all my friends that knew me, I knew everybody out there at that time. A lot of them I'd gone to school with. I remember one day I went home going to go eat lunch and go to work. I went out there and got my Lincoln and put the key in the ignition, turned it, hit the starter button. It fired right up. All the wires on that thing on the top of the engine ran down and dropped off to a spark plug. Well, they went out there and took all the wires loose on my engine. There's everybody sitting there to watch me have a lot of trouble. I got in there, started up. I could hear those things arcing down there, but I just drove them down the street. I got a couple of blocks away from the college where they couldn't see me. Stopped and turned it off. Went out there and put the wires back on the spark plugs. Drove on. Them guys had a hard time figuring out how I drove that off after they'd pulled all the wires off the spark plugs. But it was a lot of fun, let me tell you.